everybody. We're here for episode 2, the next chapters of Charlotte's Web, to see what life was like for Wilbur on the farm. This chapter is called Loneliness. The next day was rainy and dark. Rain fell on the roof of the barn and dripped steadily on the eaves. Rain fell in the barnyard and ran through the crooked courses down into the lane where thistles and pigweed grew. Rain spattered against Mrs. Zuckerman's kitchen windows and came gushing out of the downspouts. Rain fell on the back of sheep as they grazed in the meadow, and when the sheep got tired of standing in the rain, they walked slowly up the lane and into the sheepfold. Rain upset Wilbur's plans. Wilbur had planned to go out this day and dig a new hole in his yard. He had other plans too, and his plans for the day went something like this. Breakfast at 6:30, skim milk, crust, middlings, bits of donuts, wheat cakes with drops of maple syrup sticking to them, potato skins, leftover custard pudding with raisins and bits of shredded wheat. Breakfast would be finished by 7. From 7 to 8, Wilbur planned to have a talk with Templeton, a rat that lived under his trough. Talking with Templeton was not the most interesting occupation in the world, but it was better than nothing. From 8 to 9, Wilbur planned to take a nap outdoors in the sun. 9 to 11, he planned to dig a hole or trench or possibly find something good to eat buried in the dirt. From 11 to 12, he planned to stand still and watch flies on the boards, watch bees in the clover, and watch swallows in the air. 12 o'clock, lunchtime, middlings, warm water, apple parings, meat gravy, carrot scrapings, meat scraps, stale almond hominy, and the wrapper off a package of cheese. Lunch would be over at 1. From 1 to 2, Wilbur planned to sleep. From 2 to 3, he planned to scratch itchy places by rubbing against the fence. From 3 to 4, he planned on standing perfectly still and think about what it was like to be alive and wait for Fern. At 4 would come supper: skim milk, leftover sandwich from Lurvy's lunchbox, prune skins, a morsel of it, a bit of that, fried potatoes, marmalade drippings, a little more of this, a little more of that, a piece of baked apple, and a scrap of upside-down cake. Wilbur had gone to sleep thinking of these plans, and he woke up at 6 and saw it was raining, and it seemed as though he couldn't bear it. "I get everything all beautifully planned out, and it has to rain," he said. For a while, he stood gloomily indoors, and then he walked to the door and looked out. Drops of rain stuck to his face. His yard was cold and wet. His trough had an inch of rainwater in it, and Templeton was nowhere to be seen. "Are you out there, Templeton?" called Wilbur. There was no answer. Suddenly, Wilbur felt lonely and friendless. "One day's just like another," he groaned. "I'm very young. I have no real friend here at the barn. It's going to rain all morning and all afternoon, and Fern won't come in such bad weather. Oh, honestly." And Wilbur was crying again for the second time in 2 days. At 6:30, Wilbur heard the banging of a pail. Lurvy was standing outside in the rain stirring up breakfast. "Come on, pig," said Lurvy. Wilbur didn't budge. Lurvy dumped the slop, scraped the pail, and walked away. He noticed there was something wrong with the pig. Wilbur didn't want food. He wanted love. He wanted a friend, someone he could play with, that would play with him. He mentioned this to Goose, who was sitting quietly in the corner of the sheepfold. "Will you come over here and play with me?" he asked. Sorry, said the goose. "I'm sitting on my eggs. 8 of them. Got to keep them toasty warm. I have to stay right here. I'm no flibberty-ibberty-gibbet. I do not play when there are eggs to hatch. I'm expecting goslings." "Well, I didn't think you were expecting woodpeckers," said Wilbur bitterly. Wilbur next tried one of the lambs. "Will you please play with me?" he asked. "Certainly not," said the lamb. "In the first place, I cannot get into your pen, and as I am not old enough to jump over the fence. In the second place, I am not interested in pigs. Pigs mean less than nothing to me." What do you mean less than nothing?" replied Wilbur. "I don't think there's any such thing as less than nothing. Nothing's absolutely the limit of nothingness. It's the lowest you can go. It's the end of the line. How can something be less than nothing? Is there something that was less than nothing? Then nothing would not be nothing, and it would be something, even though it's a very little bit of something. But nothing is nothing. When then nothing has nothing, that's less than it is." "Oh, be quiet," said the lamb. "Go play by yourself. I do not play with pigs." Sadly, Wilbur lay down and listened to the rain, and soon he saw the rat climbing down the slanting board that he used as a stairway. "Will you play with me, Templeton?" said Wilbur. "Play?" said Templeton, twirling his whiskers. "Play? I hardly know the meaning of the word." "Well," said Wilbur, "it means to fun, to frolic, to run and skip and make merry." "I never do any of those things if I can avoid them," replied the rat sourly. "I prefer to spend my time eating, gnawing, spying, and hiding. I am a glutton. but not a merrymaker. Right now, I'm on my way to your trough to eat your breakfast since you haven't got sense enough to eat it yourself. And Templeton the rat crept stealthily along the wall and disappeared into a private tunnel that he dug between the door and the trough in Wilbur's yard. Templeton was a crafty rat, and he had things pretty much on his own and his own way. The tunnel was an example of his skill and his cunning. The tunnel enabled him to get from the barn to his hiding place under the pig trough without coming out into the open. He had tunnels and runways all over Mr. Zuckerman's farm and could get from one place to another without being seen. Usually he slept during the daytime and was abroad only after dark. Wilbur watched him disappear into his tunnel, and in a moment he saw the rat's sharp nose poke out from underneath the wooden trough. Cautiously, Templeton pulled himself to the edge of the trough. This was almost more than Wilbur could stand. On this dreary, rainy day to see his breakfast being eaten by somebody else? He knew Templeton was getting soaked out there in the pouring rain, but even that didn't comfort him. Friendless, dejected, and hungry, he threw himself down in the manure and cried. Late that afternoon, Lurby went to Mr. Zuckerman. "I think there's something wrong with that pig of yours. He hasn't touched his food." "Give him 2 spoonfuls of sulfur and a little molasses," said Mr. Zuckerman. Wilbur couldn't believe what was happening to him when Lurby caught him and forced that medicine down his throat. That was certainly the worst day of his life. He didn't know whether he could endure the awful loneliness anymore. Darkness settled over everything, and soon there were only shadows and the noises of the sheep chewing their cuds, and occasionally the rattle of a cow chain up overhead. You can imagine Wilbur's surprise when out of the darkness came a small voice he'd never heard, and it sounded rather thin, but pleasant. "Do you want a friend, Wilbur?" it said. "I'll be a friend to you. I've watched you all day and I like you." "But I can't see you," said Wilbur, jumping to his feet. "Where are you? And who are you?" "I'm right here," said the voice. "Go to sleep. You'll see me in the morning." So this is a special friend. The night seemed long, and Wilbur's stomach was empty and his mind was full. And when your stomach is empty and your mind is full, it's hard to sleep. A dozen times during the night, Wilbur woke and stared into the blackness, listening to the sounds and trying to figure out what time it was. A barn's never perfectly quiet. Even at midnight, there's usually something stirring. The first time he woke, he heard Templeton gnawing a hole in the grain bin. Templeton's teeth scraped loudly against the wood and made quite a racket. "That crazy rat," thought Wilbur. "Why does he have to stay up all night grinding his clashers and destroying people's property? Why can't he just go to sleep like any decent animal?" The second time Wilbur woke, he heard the goose turning her nest and chuckling to herself. "What time is it?" Wilbur whispered to the goose. "Probably, obably, about 11:30, said the goose. "Why aren't you asleep, Wilbur?" "Too many things on my mind," said Wilbur. "Well," said the goose, "that's not my trouble. I have nothing at all on my mind, but I've too many things under my behind. Have you ever tried to sleep while sitting on these eggs?" "No," said Wilbur. "I suppose it is uncomfortable. How long does it take for a goose egg to hatch?" Approximately 30 days all told," answered the goose. "But I cheat a little. On warm afternoons, I pull a little straw over the eggs and I go out for a walk." Wilbur yawned, went back to sleep, and in his dreams he heard again that voice saying, "I'll be a friend to you, Wilbur. Go to sleep and you'll see me in the morning." About half an hour before dawn, Wilbur woke and listened. The barn was still dark. The sheep lay motionless, and even the goose was quiet. And overhead on the main floor, nothing stirred. The cows were resting, the horses dozed. Templeton had quit work and gone off somewhere on an errand. The only thing was a slight scraping noise over the rooftop where the weather vanes swung back and forth. Wilbur loved the barn when it was like this, calm and quiet, waiting for light. "Day's almost here," he thought, and through a small window a faint gleam appeared. One by one the stars went out, and Wilbur could see the goose a few feet away. She sat with her head tucked under her wing, and then he could see the sheep and the lambs, and the sky lightened. "Oh, beautiful day, it's here at last. Today I shall find my friend." Wilbur looked everywhere. He searched his pen thoroughly. He examined the window ledge, stared up at the ceiling, but he saw nothing new. Finally, he decided he'd just speak up. He hated to break the lovely stillness of the dawn by using his voice, but he couldn't think of another way to locate the mysterious new friend who was nowhere to be seen. So Wilbur cleared his throat. "Attention, please," he said in a loud, firm voice. "Will the party who addressed me at bedtime last night kindly make himself or herself known by giving an appropriate sign or signal?" Wilbur paused and listened. All the other animals lifted their heads and stared at him, and Wilbur blushed. but he was determined to get in touch with his unknown friend. "Attention, please," he said. "I will repeat the message. Will the party who addressed me at bedtime last night kindly speak up? Please tell me who you are, if you are my friend." The sheep looked at each other in disgust. "Stop your nonsense, Wilbur," said the oldest sheep. "If you have a new friend here, you're probably disturbing his rest. The quickest way to spoil a friendship is to wake somebody up in the morning before he's ready. How can you make sure this friend's an early riser?" "I beg everyone's pardon," whispered Wilbur. "I didn't mean to be objectionable." He lay down meekly on the manure, facing the door. He didn't know it, but his friend was nearby. And the old sheep was right. The friend was still asleep. Soon Lurvy appeared with slops for breakfast, and Wilbur rushed out, ate everything in a hurry, and lit the trough. The sheep moved off down the lane. The gander waddled along behind them, pulling grass. And then, just as Wilbur was settling down for his morning nap, he heard again the thin voice that had addressed him the night before. "Salutations," said the voice. Wilbur jumped to his feet. "Salu what?" he cried. "Salutations," repeated the voice. "What are they and who and where are you?" screamed Wilbur. Please tell me where you are, and what are salutations?" "Salutations are greetings," said the voice. "When I say salutations, it's my fancy way of saying hello or good morning. Actually, it's a silly expression, and I'm surprised that I use it at all. As for my whereabouts, that's easy. Look up here in the corner of the doorway. Here I am, look, I'm waving." At last Wilbur saw the creature that had spoken to him in a kindly way. Stretched across the upper part of the doorway was a big spider web, and hanging from the top of the web, head down, was a large gray spider. She was about the size of a gumdrop. She had 8 legs, and she was waving one of them at Wilbur in a friendly greeting. "See me now?" she asked. "Oh, yes, indeed," said Wilbur. "Yes, indeed. How are you? Good morning. Salutations. Very pleased to meet you. What is your name, please? May I have your name?" "My name," said the spider, "is Charlotte." "Charlotte what?" asked Wilbur eagerly. "Charlotte A. Cavatica. But just call me Charlotte." "I think you're beautiful," said Wilbur. "Well, I am pretty," said Charlotte. "There's no denying that. Almost all spiders are rather nice looking. I'm not as flashy as some, but I'll do. I wish I could see you, Wilbur, as clearly as you can see me." "Why can't you?" asked Wilbur. "I'm right here." "Yes, but I'm nearsighted," replied Charlotte. I've always been dreadfully nearsighted. It's good in some ways and not good in others. Watch me wrap up this fly." A fly that had been crawling along Wilbur's trough had flown up and blundered into the lower part of Charlotte's web and was tangled into sticky threads. The fly was beating his wings furiously, trying to break loose and free himself. "First," said Charlotte, "I dive at him." She plunged headfirst toward the fly. As she dropped, a tiny silken thread unwound from her rear end. "Next, I wrap him up." She grabbed the fly, threw a few jets of silk around it, rolled it over and over, wrapping it so it couldn't move. Wilbur watched in horror. He could hardly believe what he was seeing, and although he detested flies, he felt sorry for this one. "There," said Charlotte. "Now I'll knock him out, so he'll be more comfortable." She bit the fly. "He can't feel a thing now," she remarked. "He'll be a perfect breakfast for me." "You mean you eat flies?" gasped Wilbur. "Certainly, flies, bugs, grasshoppers, choice beetles, moths, butterflies, tasty cockroaches, gnats, granddaddy longlegs, centipedes, mosquitoes, crickets, anything that's careless enough to get caught in my web. I have to live, don't I?" "Why, yes, of course," said Wilbur. "Do they taste good?" "Delicious, of course. I don't really eat them. I drink them. Drink their blood. I love blood," said Charlotte. And her pleasant, thin voice grew even thinner and more pleasant. "Don't say that," groaned Wilbur. "Please don't say things like that." "Why not? It's true, and I have to say what's true. I'm not entirely happy about my diet of flies and bugs, but it's the way I'm made. A spider has to pick up a living somehow or another, and I happen to be a trapper. I just naturally build a web, trap flies and other insects. My mother was a trapper before me, and her mother was a trapper before her. All our family have been trappers, way back for thousands and thousands of years. We spiders have been laying for flies and bugs." "It's a miserable inheritance," said Wilbur gloomily. He was sad because his new friend was so bloodthirsty. "Yes, it is," said Charlotte, "but I can't help it. I don't know how the first spider in the early days of the world happened to think of this fancy idea of spinning a web, but she did, and it was clever of her too. And since then, all of us spiders have had to work the same trick. It's not a bad pitch on the whole. It's cruel," said Wilbur, who did not intend to be argued out of his position. "Well, you can't talk," said Charlotte. "You have your meals brought to you in a pail. Nobody feeds me. I have to get my own living, live by my wits. I have to be sharp and clever lest I go hungry. I have to think things out, catch what I can, take what comes. And it just so happens, my friend, that what comes is flies, insects, and bugs. And furthermore, said Charlotte, shaking one of her legs, do you realize that if I didn't catch bugs and eat them, bugs would increase and multiply and get so numerous they could destroy the earth, wipe out everything? Really? Said Wilbur. I wouldn't want that to happen. Perhaps your web's a good thing after all. A goose had been listening to this conversation and chuckling to herself. There are a lot of things Wilbur doesn't know about life, she thought. He's really a very innocent little pig. He doesn't know what's going to happen to him about Christmas time. He has no idea that Mr. Zuckerman and Lurvy are plotting to kill him. And the goose raised herself a little and poked her eggs a little further under her so that they would receive the full heat from her warm body and soft feathers. Charlotte stood quietly over the fly, preparing to eat it. Wilbur laid down and closed his eyes. He was tired from his wakeful night and from the excitement of meeting someone for the first time. A breeze brought him the smell of clover, the sweet-smelling world beyond his fence. Well, he thought, I've got a new friend, all right. What a gamble friendship is. Charlotte's fierce, brutal, scheming, bloodthirsty, everything I don't like. How can I learn to like her, even though she is pretty and, of course, clever? Wilbur was merely suffering the doubts and fears that often go with finding a new friend. In good time, he would discover that he was mistaken about Charlotte. Underneath her rather bold and cruel exterior, she had a very kind heart, and she was going to prove loyal and true to the very end. And that's all I'm going to read today. And next time we'll find out what happens with Wilbur and with Charlotte and the other animals on the farm. So I'll see you next time.